Welcome again to another talk at the ATX Game Makers Social Lounge. As you know, my name is Donald Harris. I am going to welcome to the stage three awesome people, and they're going to have a chat about the next chapter in careers. And so this is just, I will let Tiffany give a better overview of the talk. But without further ado, I want to introduce Tiffany Onderchuk. Come on up. So she will be the moderator, and she's also my partner in crime. So give her another round of applause for not only creating this book, but also all the decorations and all of that stuff that you see back there, that came out of her head. So thank you again for all of your hard work there, for sure. We have Sadia Copeland. Come on up, Sadia. And then we also have Prism Jet. Come on. And so I am going to exit the stage and let these folks talk.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to put together this panel as a way to look at careers where you make drastic changes at some point. For example, I went from retail to now I work in law, to soon I will be moving into accounting. I'm going to be 38 years old, but it's not really starting a new career so much as combining what I have been doing with what I will be doing. It's adding skills, more like chapters of a book instead of like starting over. And so I wanted to put together this panel for other people who are in similar situations. You want to move into gaming, you have skills now. A move into gaming isn't going to be a start from the beginning. You're not necessarily an entry-level employee because you have skills and stuff that you are going to bring into that industry and into those roles. So I have two people here who have also done very similar things. They've made shifts, and I think it's going to be a great talk. So if y'all want to start by giving a little bit of like the background, the different chapters you've been through to get to where you are now.
All right, I'll start off. Hi, folks. My name is Sadia Copeland. I am a product manager with VMware Tanzu Labs, previously known as Pivotal Labs. I have done all sorts of weird career changes. So I started when I was 17 years old. I went to college, a traditional four-year college. Okay. So I went to a traditional four-year college, and in my first C++ class, I struggled a little bit because I was one of two ladies in that class, and wasn't really welcome in a lot of the study groups. And when I went to go talk to my professor for help on things, he told me that this is not right for, this is not a great career for ladies. So I was 17 years old and just ended up dropping out and starting to try different things with my life. So first, I went into leasing, apartment leasing, and that was because I had to pay the bills, and if you do apartment leasing, they give you a discount on your rent, so fantastic, paying the bills. I was in that industry for a little while, kind of worked my way up. I got my real estate license. I was planning on selling houses, but that really wasn't quite what I wanted to do, so I made another drastic switch and started doing paralegal work because I thought law might be interesting. That might be where I wanted to end up. I didn't actually choose that real estate path. I just stumbled into it. So I switched over to law and was doing paralegal stuff. And then I kind of morphed into sort of I'm going to call it my bridge career, where I was basically just doing small business consulting. So when you work at a small business, the person with the most tech knowledge becomes your tech support. So here I am at these apartment leasing offices, at these legal offices, showing them how to use Excel, showing them how to migrate to Google Cloud, how to handle their backups. And I went on a date with this guy, and I told him about what I was doing, and he was like, "Did you know that you could get actually paid real money to do these things?" And I was like, tell me more about that. And so I ended up going to back to college for an associate's degree in computer science, and just through my tech career, which I've been doing this for about 7 years now. In that time, I started in test engineering. I went into integration. I've also did software development. I've done DevOps, like in every sense of DevOps, like from like racking and rating servers all the way to like release management. and then finally found my way into product management. So long story, but when I got my job as a product management consultant, the role that I have is one that would typically require 10 years of experience and at least a bachelor's or an MBA. Well, when I got this, I had 6 months of experience in product, 6 years of experience in tech, and an associate's degree in computer science. So all that to say, that background of experience, all of those years of doing different things, that does translate to real experience. And so when companies are saying, I want such and such, they actually mean, I want experience, I want knowledge, I want to know that you know how to learn. So that's who I am, that's how I got here.
Thank you. And how about you, Prism?
Hello. Is this on? I don't know. Hello. Okay. So hi, I'm Prism Jet. I am a content engineer at Alchemy Labs. My story starts about when I was 17, 18, something like that. I wanted to go into game art, and my parents said, no. So after that, I kind of just went into retail, as you do. My background has some food service in it, a lot of just kind of entry-level jobs for a while until I moved into tech support as well for an e-commerce solution. Moved over to Indeed, and during this whole time, I was like, man, I really want to work in games. So I have a pretty varied background as well. I have stayed a little bit closer to tech, as I got older, but I have only been in games for about 3 years, which also, it's been 3 years. That's incredible. I just realized that right now. But yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell my chapters that it took to get here. Also varied experience, and I absolutely want to second what was said about what jobs are looking for is not necessarily for, I want this many years of experience in this particular role. If you can prove to yourself or to your employers that, yes, I do have these skills from this background that may not look traditional for this role that I'm applying for, you can absolutely get it. So that's my story.
Thanks, y'all. Okay, so I want to focus more on how having a diverse background allows you to actually realize what your skills are and how you think those make you a better employee and where you are now. For example, my skill has nothing to do with law, it has nothing to do with accounting. My actual skill is that I can define what people need and create a system that solves that. And usually for people who do not know that their system is currently broken, they know it's not working, they'll hire me to do something like be a paralegal or take the office digital. None of this is what they need. They don't know what they need because I mostly work for sole practitioners. So it's just them. They're really good at being lawyers, but they are also lawyers with like squirrels with law degrees, just very scattered. And so that's my skill set. I've picked that up. I've honed that through various jobs. And so when I bring that to a new field, I always have that skill set, and that sets me apart. How do y'all think that the skills you've picked up along the way actually help in your current role?
So I love this question because one of my favorite things to do in interviews is talk about my time as a World of Warcraft raid leader and about how that makes me just right for your position. So as a product manager, it's a lot of managing of a product. There's a lot of orchestrating of where people are going, what they're doing. And so I do like to talk about how once upon a time when we had to do 40-person vanilla WoW raids, I had to wrangle a bunch of adults who were doing this in their own spare time and trying to keep them on task. That's actually a story that resonates really well in an interview because it's both fun and topical. So it's really important to kind of find those little pieces of your background that speak to what it is that you're trying to do. And just kind of remember that it's all of those experiences that you had along the way that led you to where you are, and find that strength in your past experiences. There's a really great book by David Epstein called Range. So if you ever have a moment, definitely check it out. It's called it's Range: Why Generalists Succeed in a Specialist's World. and it talks about how having a breadth of experience allows you to adapt to complex situations. So one of the examples in the book talks about chess, for example. There is a study of like, if you study chess from a young age, yes, you're gonna be great at it. On the other hand, if the rules change at all, if you add something like, change what one of the pieces does, change the size of the game board, add something like a fog of war to that, all of a sudden, people who have specialized in this don't actually adapt as well as people who have a broad range of knowledge. So I think just understanding that there is strength in generalization is what I would say is important.
I absolutely agree with that. Actually, it's funny that you brought up the raid leading, because one of the things that kind of got me into games as well, like renewed my passion for it, is in 2016 I went to a house party where somebody strapped a toaster to my face, and I was like, oh my God, VR, this is amazing. It honestly like changed my life, that party. But in finding VR and finding the joy of it and the brilliance behind an experience that you put on your face was incredible to me, and it still is. I still am in love with VR today. But a big thing is that I play a lot of VR chat, and having that experience, which is not necessarily from like a technical role or like anything that had to do with the job, did help me into the position that I am today, because I do have experience with these type of systems. I have taught myself how to make avatars, how to do some Blender work, and this all kind of relates to being a content engineer, which, small backstory, a content engineer is like somebody who puts in small interactions or would create the text on a poster or create some dialogue or maybe some like temp VO. So we do a lot of everything, even some like programming. But having this varied background is incredibly important. And even if you're like, well, I don't know, maybe I play this game, but it may not be directly applicable, you can find something that is directly applicable to whatever it is that you're trying to get in. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
Okay, so one thing that's really hard when you've kind of had a variety of experiences is, how do you present yourself? Like, what's your 60-second story? What do you focus on so that you don't sound like you've just been jumping from thing to thing, because it's not jumping, it's a progression. So how do you present yourself when you want someone to hire you?
Thank you so much for that very hard question, Tiffany.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. For me, it's about understanding what the other person's asking for and then picking and choosing the parts of my story that are relevant to what they're looking for. So as an example, I have a very diverse background in tech. I started as a test engineer. I had no idea that's what I was gonna end up doing, but that was the first job and I took it, learned a lot. If I were speaking to somebody about test engineering or anything like that, I'd probably talk about that part of my background. And then I also like to pull in examples from my other parts of my career. So for example, if I'm talking to somebody who wants to talk about test engineering, yeah, I'll talk about when I was working, so my background's in DoD systems. I might talk about some of the work that I've done there testing those systems. They are tough systems because we're talking about servers that are out on like Navy ships. Those things are old, you can't swap them out, and they are damaged by salt and all sorts of crazy things. The network is terrible because we're talking ships out in the Pacific. And then also talking about, times that there was a time when I was at the apartment leasing complex office, and we had a new guy who was hanging out on the weekend. I don't know what he was downloading on the computers, y'all, but he messed up the whole system. So I get in on Monday morning, our whole system is virus laden. And so now I've got to troubleshoot this whole system because, like I said, the most technical person in a small office is the person who's going to do all of your tech support. So yeah, I had to troubleshoot this whole system. I had to get online. I had to go find some forums for people who would help me figure out what was going on. I had to shut down the entire network, clean every single computer one by one, and then make sure the router was good to go, get it all up and running again. And so, it's like finding those pieces, and that's just, an example if I were talking to somebody who wanted test engineering, but you just like find out who you're talking to and what is of interest to them, and then tell your story as it relates to what that job is for.
I feel like that's also, I will again second that. We have a lot of similar opinions on things, but definitely condensing your story into what you feel like a potential hiring manager would want to hear is definitely going to be most helpful to you. However, I do think that if you whenever I was trying to get into games and trying to break into the industry, I would talk about everything I was doing. This is what I'm working on. I would talk to anybody who would listen. But I kind of made sure that I was making friends too. It's really hard for me personally, and in this industry, I feel like, and this is kind of my own opinion, that networking is hard. And so coming up to somebody and being like, hi, job please, is really not my favorite way of doing things. But if you talk to people and you're like, hey, I am working on this is my goal, but also what games do you like to play? Being friendly, being open, and also presenting relevant information is always going to get you going further than just kind of I don't know. I feel like there's definitely, you gotta present yourself as a person as well, as more than just a resume, right? So I feel like that's kind of the mentality that I tried to go into it. I did also try to network in a way that was kind of here's my business card. I do these things. I'm learning this. And that didn't work out well for me. So definitely going the route of, here's what I'm working on. This is exciting to me. And also, hey, what are you doing? What's your gaming? What games do you play? Definitely helps with presenting yourself.
I really like that, because I think having that sort of starter question of what do you do? What do you like? I love that. What games do you play? Yeah. What games do you play?
VR chat.
I am currently playing Final Fantasy XIV because I need to get a large house, y'all. That's it.
That brings us to our next question. How do you network? Because I have been told over and over again, go to these very formal events, tell people your name, and they will give you a job. Okay, well, I don't like large groups of people. This is terrifying, just so y'all know. This is very scary, and I would not go to networking events. I would just rather be unemployed under a bridge than walk into a room with a bunch of people in it and say, hi, I'm looking for a job. So what are some ways that y'all know of to network? I really like the whole make friends. You're there to know people. It doesn't necessarily have to be super formal. How do you know where to go? How do you know what to say? How do you feel comfortable walking through the door?
All right, so events like this are fantastic. Find your people and then go make friends with your people. Find something that you're passionate about and then speak passionately about that thing. And just really trust yourself in those rooms. I completely agree with y'all, this is terrifying. So I think we all just, have to understand everybody's a little bit in the same boat. It's not easy for anybody to, maybe it is for some people. I just don't get those people. But it's easy for some people to just be like, hi, stranger, here's who I am and here's what I do. It's hard, but it's hard for the other person on the other side of it too. It's hard for all of us. So yeah, like you said, make friends, and meetups are great. Austin has a really great meetup set up for tech. That was one of the spaces where I really met a lot of people who helped me both learn what to learn, but also in that making connections. And then the other thing I like to do, and this sounds really crazy, but I go find somebody who works at a place that I really love or has the job that I want, and I just hit them up on LinkedIn, hey, do you have 30 minutes to just chat? And worst case scenario, they ignore you. Best case scenario, you get a 30-minute conversation with somebody who can tell you their story and possibly maybe a connection that's going to help you in the future.
Yeah, so that's great. That is wonderful advice as well. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit and went over, kind of my networking style. But I will say that I will second the meetup events. There are some really great ones for the games industry. Obviously, ATX Game Makers, Games Y'all. There used to be one. Games Y'all is kind of like a monthly showcase where you go and like get to catch up with people. And that it's kind of the spiritual successor of one of the ones that I got started out, which was Juegos Rancheros, which basically I would show up to this meetup. I was struggling learning programming. I was working on like little projects myself, but going up to the same people and going, hey, how's it going? How's your project from last month? Just basically catching up with people is an incredible way to find connections. This is how I learned about, I was just speaking about this earlier to somebody, learned about the CA program at GDC, which is the Conference Associates. It's an incredible program. If you get the opportunity to go work GDC, it's great, huge community there, wonderful. That's a little bit of a like higher, not really higher, I don't really know the word for it. It's not as accessible, but if you can make it into it, it's wonderful. And then just, having relaxed environments like this where you just get to talk to people, I think that that's invaluable. So there's that. Let's see, there was something else I had to say and I don't remember it. It's gone forever. Okay.
I will say one thing I've really liked about the gaming community, because I did not grow up playing video games at all, and now I do not have the muscle memory for it. I'm not very good at it, but y'all have been incredibly welcoming, and I love the way there's these spaces where people just bring what they're working on, and it's an instant conversation starter. Like, even people who don't have the best social skills, you have something to talk about, you have something in your hands, you have something to play. There's rules, and it's fabulous. I have really enjoyed that part about the gaming community.
I had one more thing, I remembered it. Is it okay? So if you're kind of like an introvert, I will say that the best things to do in these kind of situations, if you're like, I don't really know how to talk to people, this is kind of hard. It is hard. Reps are your friend. Just try it over and over and over again. And if you're like, I don't know what to talk about, ask somebody questions. Ask them about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. So if you're like, hey, what are you working on? What interests you? Like, what can we connect on? That's going to be an instant conversation starter. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you're like, I don't know what to do, just ask somebody about themselves.
I really like that.
So I used to be an extreme introvert when I was in high school, like just extreme. I would not talk to people. And when I had to have my first job of apartment leasing, where I just needed to do it to pay the bills, now you got to start talking to lots of people. So like to your point about the reps, I had in my head a conversation, it's Texas, so you always start with how about them Cowboys and see where you go from there. And it's a great one because people either say, oh, I hate them, or, oh, I love it, and you just let them talk. And then, if that didn't catch their attention, be like, oh, are you watching anything fun on TV now? And see if that triggers something for them. And I just kind of had this script that I would go down until finally at the end, if I just could not catch somebody's attention, I would tell them a story about the time that I burned ramen. Because if you tell an embarrassing story about yourself, it immediately creates kind of a connection and a vulnerability. And then, everybody's got a story of a time they screwed up something. So yeah, that's my go-to at the very end if nothing else is working. Y'all, one time I burned ramen. I am that bad at cooking, so.
I have also burned ramen. I think this is a more common experience than we actually talk about.
Yeah, who else has burned ramen here? Love it, yes.
Sometimes you forget the water, sometimes you forget the ramen, sometimes you forget you're cooking the ramen.
It was that one for me, yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I think really helps people get into an industry isn't necessarily networking with everybody. It's finding your one person who does like to walk up to people and just say, hi, my name's, we'll use Donald randomly. For no reason at all. And when you find that person will do your talking for you, and they are your advocate. So you just have to show them how excited you are. So that's a good step, is finding your advocate. Did y'all have an advocate or someone that just really went out there for you?
I'll let you go first on this.
Okay. Hello. Yes, I definitely did. I've been lucky enough to have several advocates in my career as in games. The first one being Patrick Curry, and I talked to Patrick several times. Patrick is at Farbridge along with Donald, and Patrick has been in the games industry for quite a while, has a wealth of knowledge. Seriously, if you get a chance to meet this guy, he's great. But he noticed what I was doing and was like, hey, so you've been at this for a while. You've been learning to program for a while. I'm going to send you to a coding camp. And I was like, oh, this is okay, sure. Yeah, I'll do it. That's great. But Patrick really took me under his wing. He then offered me an internship at Farbridge, and then I was hired on as a contractor later, where I was able to work with Donald, who is also amazing, as you all know. And I also got to work with my first mentor, who was incredibly helpful as far as like software engineering and programming goes. His name is Adam Leslie, and he just took me under his wing and taught me everything. So if you find your advocate, absorb everything from them. Let's just like all of their information, all of any wisdom that they have to share with you. Make sure you write it down in your brain and your notebook, wherever, and just listen. Try to do what works best for you based on that advice. But once you find your advocate, that's a big turning point for you. So make sure that you're listening for that, looking for that person. And when you know who it is, you'll know.
Yeah, I think that the advocate, and I'm going to think of it as like mentors here rather than advocates, because I've had a lot of them in all of the different career paths that I've taken. So when I was in real estate, my mentor was Shannon Vance. She runs Klein Properties down on West Campus. So if y'all know those frat houses down on West Campus, that's what she runs. She taught me everything I needed to know about real estate and helped me in that space. She also taught me a lot of management skills that I use to this day. So I always cite her as one of my most important mentors. But for every career jump I've made, when I moved from test engineering to software development, I had a mentor who helped me along that space. And then when I moved from software development into what I'm going to call DevOps, I had a mentor who was the head of test engineering for WebMD, and now he's lead automation over at MongoDB. So like just really fantastic mentors who like dumped knowledge into me on the topic that they really loved. But I think it's also important to treat the mentorship like a bi-directional relationship. So remember that like your mentor is actually learning from you as well. Like you have perspectives that you can bring to them as well. So I have my current mentor, he is a phenomenal product manager at the VMware Tanzu Labs, previously Pivotal Labs, Daniel Wittenberg, and I think we work really well together because he teaches me his decades of product experience, and I can kind of teach him, new perspectives on how to view things and, how to approach problems in a different way. So I love my mentors, really appreciate them, and I think it's important to remember your own worth in the mentorship so that, they're getting something from mentoring you as well.
And I'd also like to highlight one thing that you said earlier about asking people for time. If you are like, hey, this person has given me a lot of information or even some information or even I just want to know more. I mean, personally, if somebody's like, hey, can we talk for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or if I can pick your brain for a little bit, even over like Twitter or something like that, I'm totally open to it. Like I had a lot of people open doors for me and I want to pay it forward. And a lot of industry professionals do as well. So if you're like, hey, I don't really know what to do in this situation, asking is a key to opening doors. If you feel like you're waiting for a mentor to come to you, maybe ask them. Maybe see if, going up to somebody and being like, will you be my mentor, is a little bit straightforward. But if you want to talk to them and just learn more, just ask.
It seems like people are really open to just accepting that. People really like to mentor other people.
It's fun.
So I think one thing that happens if you've kind of had like several different like stages in your adult life is that it starts to affect how you see yourself. And you're afraid that someone else is going to see that baggage that you are carrying. And it can lead to imposter syndrome. It can lead to feeling like you can never fail or someone's going to fire you. You really do carry that around because you see yourself in your last role. But no one who just hired you is seeing you in your last role. They see you in your current role. How have y'all dealt with just imposter syndrome, feeling like you belong, just even also seeing how people perceive you based on like gender or like anything else? Like how does that affect how you feel in the workplace and how do you overcome that?
Oh boy, imposter syndrome. I would say that imposter syndrome is like, everybody has it. It's not, I mean, I feel like it's like, oh, it's only me. You know, everybody else seems so put together. Everybody has it. And I think as soon as you accept that fact and then realize that you're not alone in this, that helps tremendously. Also, just believe your peers. People who say good things about you, just tell the voice in your head, shut up, which is more difficult than it sounds. But if you can just trust your peers and believe what they say about you, you will find that you will gain confidence in yourself. And that really helps, especially if you are a marginalized gender or a person of color. I feel like we can have more like that imposter syndrome is intensified. So definitely listen to your peers. If you feel like your peers are maybe not the most honest with you, go find peers that are more like you, whether that is as a person of color, as a marginalized gender, as the same type of gamer. And you will always find support with those people. And so listen to that support, accept that support, and you should be able to at least get a little bit better. It never fully goes away, but it can help.
So imposter syndrome is, man, it's rough, and you're right. Everybody has it. We all have it. One of my favorite workshops that I do for as a product management consultant is I do a workshop on imposter syndrome to kind of help people, honestly, harness it. Because when you are working with somebody, I would rather work with somebody who is humble and maybe doubts themselves sometime than somebody who is very Dunning-Kruger who thinks that they know everything. So I think there's a common programming joke that, you know, a junior developer, they come in, they have no idea what they're doing, and they're just like, I don't know any of this. Like a medium developer, like a middle level one is gonna say, oh, I know this, I got this. And then your senior level developer comes in and says, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's true, because when you're at the senior level, all of a sudden you realize how little you actually knew because these systems are so complex. Tech is changing every single day. So just because you might have 20 years of experience doing exactly the same thing, somebody else might come in with 6 months of experience with some brand new framework that nobody else has touched before, and maybe, you don't know everything anymore. So it's really important to, not let the imposter syndrome hold you back. Make sure that you are not letting it stop you from doing the things that you want to do. But at the same time, understand that there is some beauty in the feeling of being humble and the feeling of the enormity of what we do in technology. One of my first experiences with Golang was kind of reading the Kubernetes code base. And I remember looking at that code base and just feeling absolute awe that this is a massive code base. So many thousands and thousands of humans across the entire world are all contributing back to this code base that has made such a huge impact on our society at this point in time. The magnitude is enormous. So sometimes when I think about my imposter syndrome, I look at that as, kind of like we are humans in a huge universe. Well, we are technologists in a really fascinating space. Technology is incredible. These code bases are incredible. Of course we feel a little dwarfed by it sometimes. And that's okay. There is absolutely beauty in that.
I really like that. I think one thing that's important to remember is that you aren't an imposter because they hired you, and you cannot be an imposter at being yourself. You are authentically you, and that is what any good workplace actually wants out of you. It won't be every workplace, but not every place is a place you need to work. I think that brings us to our next one. Like, I feel like when you're new in a field, you don't necessarily know how to define your boundaries. And you are just so grateful for the opportunity that you are willing to do anything that's asked of you. And sometimes you're asked too much because the person who hired you, you're the first person to take that role, and they don't know what you're supposed to be doing either. Often you'll be hired for a role that isn't defined. So part of it is a teamwork to define the boundaries of that role, and some of it is that you actually have to define your personal boundaries and how work is going to play with your personal boundaries. So how do y'all deal with those situations?
This is a real tough one in the games industry because I've been lucky enough that my games career have been at studios that really value rest, and they know that if you don't have anything left in your cup to pour, then like you can't do anything for anyone else, right? You need to take care of yourself first. And so I think that having the serendipity of working with studios that know this and are happy to help if something comes up. Like for me specifically, I have chronic pain. Sometimes it really interferes with my work, but I've been lucky enough to have studios that understand. I cannot do crunch. I can't do it. It will mess me up for the next several days, if not weeks. So just having something that you can promise to yourself of like, I'm not going to do this, I cannot do this, and I will not do this. So just making sure that you can support yourself and you have guidelines for yourself, I think are the best way to protect yourself from letting your boundaries slip.
Yeah, I think that is really good advice, like knowing yourself and what you can do, and then making sure that you are working in an environment that is supportive of setting boundaries. And I think that's going to be something, I know a lot of folks who've worked at a lot of places, sometimes crunch time happens. My husband was at Bethesda before like Fallout 76 released, and so like leading up to that was like insane. I did not see him for weeks on end. I've also had friends who, like Blizzard or Riot, like right before a big game releases, like they just disappear off the face of the planet for like 6 months at a time. And it's hard because sometimes that is just the nature of things, is sometimes it's gonna happen, but you have to be able to understand, like you said, those boundaries, and then feel confident in setting them where you need to set them, because you really can't, like, you will burn yourself out if you overwork yourself. So in one of my early roles, like to your point of like when you're new to an industry, when you're just coming in, you think that you have to say yes to everything. And I was saying yes to everything. And to your point about like, sometimes it's a bi-directional thing here. When I first wanted to be a DevOps engineer, it was like the new hotness, and it was like, oh, look, everybody's got this title, I'm gonna do it. And my company was like, what is a DevOps engineer? And I'm like, it's this is what it is. And we do dev, and we do ops, and we do it all. And so I end up on this project, like I said, everything from like literally accepting the delivery of the servers, racking and rating them, networking it up, installing the OS, and then setting up, all the infrastructure on it, setting up our entire CI/CD pipelines. I taught these developers Git. I ran the release pipelines, and then I started writing test frameworks for all of this. By the end of it, I was exhausted, and I was like, y'all, I am now burnt out, and it is time for me to find my next move. And so I moved into software development. But the team that they replaced me with was 6 people big, and I checked in with them literally 2 weeks ago, and they're like, yeah, we're about to hire 2 more people just to maintain the system that you had set up 5 years ago. you push yourself hard, and like that was a failing on my part because I just kept doing because I just was not saying no. And also, you know, on my employer's part, I love them a million. They were so supportive of like saying, yes, you're gonna do something new. We'll give you everything you need to do it. And they meant money. They did not, and they meant servers. They did not mean extra people. So they were a little surprised as well when it turned out that, you know, hey, turns out DevOps engineer is actually like not a great title for a person if you don't actually have like boundaries to what that role means, because it can mean whatever you want it to mean. So yeah, just understanding where those boundaries are. And then like, I did love, like my company was so supportive when I told them. We sat down together and started defining what are the different job titles, how do I hire a big enough team to do this, what's the, you know, value of this team. But it is one where at some point one of you is going to break, and you know, either you or your company, and you just have to, if you're in a place where they're not going to be understanding about the fact that one person, you know, can't work 120 hours a week, you know, maybe it's time to find something different.
That also reminds me of one thing that stuck with me for forever, which since I heard it, which is if you don't schedule breaks for yourself, your body will do it for you. And it'll pick the worst time. So make sure that you take time to rest and take time to replenish your battery so that you can go out and you can do amazing things.
I think that's really important. And I am encouraged to see that that's becoming more commonly spoken about, and that as there's been some generational shifts, people are acknowledging that it is important for employees to be real humans and healthy humans, and that work is work. It's always going to be your passion. You're always, I mean, you love what you're doing, hopefully. But even if you love what you're doing, you're still a person beyond that. So you still need to have real world experiences. It's important to do that stuff. And it really is true that there becomes a point where your body can't keep going without sleep. You cannot keep going without proper food. It is important to go to the grocery store. It's important to cook for yourself or eat nutrients. Nutrients are important. You have to do these things. And if a workplace isn't willing to let you do that, just know you've been through several jobs. You can be through another one. It's fine. I think another thing is, if you're going to be having career paths and you're going to keep changing jobs, you have to know when it's time to leave a job. And sometimes it's because you're burnt out and you don't want to work there, but sometimes you just feel that it's time to move on. Has there been a time where y'all have known that, and how did you know that it was time?
So I feel like I have a rule for myself, and this is a boundary as well, that if I start having dreams about my job that are stressful consistently, it is time to go. And I've been lucky enough to not have that happen to me recently, ever since I've joined the games industry. I've really only made one transition, and honestly, that was because I needed healthcare. That's the only reason. So, hooray, the USA and the healthcare system. It's great. But no, I've been very lucky that I have not had to resort to, you know, paying attention to my one rule, because I haven't had that. So hopefully you will have your own methods of like learning that, oh no, I really need to leave this job. And you can be faithful to yourself and true to yourself in that manner.
I think this is a funny question for me, and I laugh because one of the jokes that I have with my colleagues is I will always, like, I'm always ready to leave a job. Always, 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 always. So I reverse interview my employers. I reverse review them. So when it's time for quarterly reviews and they say, okay, this is how you've done this quarter, I'm like, okay, you get half of this review to tell me what you think about me, and then I'm gonna use the other half of it to tell you what I think about you, and here's how you can improve. And so I will always, like in the same way, like a quarterly review of some, like, hey, this is what you've done well this last quarter, and this is where you can improve. That is so important to have that conversation, and like as an employee, I appreciate that feedback because it helps me know how to improve. And I wanna give my employer the same exact opportunity. And so typically I've, like one of the jobs that I had, we had a running joke where I would go in and tell my manager, like, okay, this is what you've done well, and these are the improvements I expect to see in the next 6 months, and if you don't, I won't be here anymore. And so the joke was I was always in a constant state of quitting there. And I had a great relationship with my manager who really did, it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but it also was a little bit not. And I think it's really important to understand that your employer, they're not necessarily doing you a favor by giving you a job. You are valuable to them. You create the value for them. So it is important for them to give you what you need. And it is important for you to ask, and in some cases, demand the things that you deserve. So that's part one, is I expect my employer to always live up, I want us to be on the same page in terms of the values that I, have as an employee. I just want to make sure we're on the same page there. And then the other thing that makes me leave a job is, I'm gonna say this in a weird way, but if I'm at the top of my game, if I feel like I am now plateaued in terms of my learning and my development, then it is now time for me to find a bigger pond. I always want to be the smallest fish. It's sort of like in real estate, you don't want to be the most expensive house on the block. I think it's the same thing in tech. You don't want to be the biggest fish in the pond. I mean, you want to always be looking for that next pond to grow in. I mean, until you're ready to, if you want to retire, go ahead, find, be the biggest fish in your pond. But while we're still in our growth period, just keep chasing those opportunities.
I think that's really good advice. Last question, what are y'all working on? What are you excited about right now?
Well, so there's some stuff at Alchemy that I can't talk about, understandably. But one thing that I am excited about is Alchemy's motto is VR for everyone, no exceptions. And today we actually released a patch for the game Cosmonius High that is an accessibility update for people with visual impairedness. So that is people who are either visually impaired at some level or completely blind can play this game in VR. So accessibility is something that's very important to me. It's something that's very exciting, especially in the medium of VR. So if that's something that is interesting to you, I think that past Alchemy games are definitely something to take a look at, just to notice the kind of things that are best practices for us, such as, smaller human mode, where if you are either seated or a smaller human, you can have tables be more accessible height for you. Things won't be out of reach. We don't have people walk around too much. And so all of these kind of things are exciting to me because that means that more people get to play our game. Accessibility is awesome.
That is awesome. Yes, accessibility is a really fun, and it's so interesting too when you're trying to add that to anything, to games. It's such a fascinating problem to solve. So I'm going to talk about the two things that I kind of work on. I'm going to talk about my day job and then my hobby job, which is my day job. I'm a product manager at I'm a product management consultant at VMware, but we are consulting with the Army at the Army Software Factory, which is located at ACC. It's at one of the ACC campuses, and it's a really awesome partnership between the Army and ACC to train soldiers on technology, like software developers, product managers, designers, and it's a really fascinating spot to be in because in the same way that I've changed careers, these are soldiers who are also basically changing careers because they go into the Army, they do, one of the guys I work with was a medic, so now he's just one of the best platform engineers I have ever worked with in my life. It's so fascinating to see how these folks, diverse backgrounds, really make them strong technologists, and it's something that's really close to my heart because that was literally my journey of going back to ACC, getting an associate's degree in computer science in this exact same building where, I can now turn around and help a whole new set of people basically make this same journey. So that is really fun and fascinating for me. Love to do that. And then for me, my husband and I like to work on games as sort of like our hobby thing. So right now we are just exploring a lot of really fun different frameworks and trying out different, we love Go. That's our favorite language. My husband used to be a C++ developer. I converted him over to Go. So he loves it now too. So we are playing with some different Golang frameworks that we're hoping to build something and then like release it by the end of this year is our plan. But we're still kind of exploring just different frameworks, and it's really a lot of fun.
Well, I think that's it for now. Does anyone have any questions? We have time for a few. Yes.
Hi, I have to use the mic. I am in my work trying to focus on K through 12 pipelines. I'm here local in Austin, so I heard some great resources for people who are starting out, maybe kind of know where their path may be starting. And I can totally self-empower and Google this, but what do you recommend for, let's say, 15 to 18-year-olds who really have no idea where to start? What are some good resources, meetups, online, all that good stuff? I love the Juegos Rancheros title. That was really hilarious. So, but other than that, for that population, where should I send them?
Do y'all know any?
I mean, I would plug ACC again. So I'm just going to plug ACC again because Austin Community College is a really fantastic place. There's lots of different classes for them. They're really affordable. I know that they're younger, but you can also, look into some of the resources that they have earlier on for like the schedules are really, really open. There's a lot of online learning opportunities there. Watching the ACC program grow over the last 10 years, especially how they support computer science, has been absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I got my associate's degree there, and they were not offering bachelor's at the time. They are offering bachelor's now. One of the things I love about Austin Community College is they pull from like local industry experts to teach a lot of these classes. So you're not just learning important skills, you're meeting people who are actively working day to day. You're meeting a lot of, you're being exposed to people who are passionate about the same types of things that you are. And just over the last 10 years, I've watched this organization grow, and it's just such an amazing local resource that we have for us here in Austin.
I'm going to go ahead and second ACC for those who are of that age who can go. If you are that age and you are interested in something, just try to take a class, see how that is. If it's specifically towards the games industry, I would say that definitely Games Y'all is a good place to start. It's once a month. I think that last weekend was their most recent one. I don't quite remember, I was out of town, but that's a great place to meet industry professionals, everywhere from just like indie to, actual, like with a studio. And then just maybe look around at casual meetups, like on meetup.com, because you never know what you're gonna be able to find there. But as far as other resources go, I can't think of any at the moment, but definitely, talking as much as you can with anybody who's remotely interested in the same thing as them is going to be wonderful. So even if you decide to go to a games meetup and you're like, hey, I met these people, let me connect you with students, that's a great place to start. You know what? That is a great skill to have. That is wonderful.
I think that part is actually really important at that age, because they are also learning how to talk to other people about what their interests are. So anytime they can practice that, that's great. Any more questions?
Hey, so our industry has a lot of layoffs, especially the past couple months. So 2 questions around that. One, what is the general timeline people have for recovery from a layoff? And what would you do at your current position to insulate yourself against a potential layoff?
I'm sure that's a super easy question.
All right. Well, I have been fortunate enough to not be impacted by layoffs. I think that that's something that it's always kind of a risk in our industry, and it is a scary thing to be like to hang over our head. I don't know how much you can do to really insulate yourself from that because it's kind of out of our hands, right? But just trying to find a place where you can be the best worker that you can be and be your best authentic self. I think that that's going to be the best way to prevent this. Now, granted, you know, things happen, life happens, it may come up. As far as a recovery period, I would just, you know, maybe take a week to rest and then just start hitting that pavement. Go to the meetups, go talk to more people, go let them know. I know that every single time that there's been a layoff, I have had industry professionals on Twitter say that if you need a position, we're hiring here. So definitely rely on your peers, rely on the internet, and also if none of y'all know about this, Grackle HQ is a job aggregator that works kind of like Indeed, but if you're like if you're like looking for job opportunities, check them out. They're free. They aren't just Austin. Throw them a buck or two on Ko-Fi if you get the chance. It's run by a good friend of mine. So yeah, just check them out as well. But yeah, it's kind of a fact of life, unfortunately. Build the network early.
Yes, and I think for me, like I said, like I have my day job and then I have my hobby job, and like my day job's pretty solid. It's not going anywhere. So I think what I might add to this is just if you have to, you know, switch to like a different industry for a little bit, remember that there are transferable skills. So like, for example, I have learned a lot in how to not just manage products, but like a lot of skills are transferable. So one of the test frameworks that I built at my company for a particular client, it was based on the way that Unreal Engine does their framework of how you develop games in Unreal Engine. So I was able to use that information to kind of create a really snazzy test framework for a government client. They were super impressed by it. They love that. And like, just FYI, like the government folks, they love gaming industry folks. They want all their UIs to look real snazzy like. They love that. They love like the networking problems that people in the gaming industry deal with. Like when I talk about like networks out on ships and things like that, like when you're trying to do like an MMO and like you're providing networks for like hundreds and millions of people at a time, you're solving a lot of the same problems that folks, you know, are in these really distressed networks are dealing with. So, you know, if you like take it back and forth, right? So if you have to do something different for a little bit just to pay the bills, look for those opportunities of learning where you're at. And vice versa, like look for the ways that your opportunities, like what you've done really influences whatever it is that you gotta do when you gotta do it. So like, don't let yourself get stale, like by going into something that, you know, maybe you don't, like if you love to do something in particular and you end up having to take a different job, try and like tailor yourself towards like still keeping that skill set alive, that whatever gives you joy, keep that part of your skill set alive.
We got one more.
Yes. Okay, but I do have a bit of career advice on that one question. I actually stole it from Breakfast at Tiffany's loosely. Always keep a side hustle option. You are never unemployed if you always have more than one job. You can't get fired from 2 in one day, right? I mean, like, that's highly unlikely. So keep something going on the side so that you have some income coming in, so you haven't completely lost everything in one day. That really helps me a lot. Okay, we have time for one more question. I think. Yeah.
Sorry. You can go ahead. Okay.
Are y'all gonna be here after the talk?
I can ask mine after the talk. It's okay.
I feel awkward.
Thank you so much for all of your advice. I had one more to add on the tangent of the layoffs and imposter syndrome. Job hunting is tough. Let's say you've gone for 1 month, 2 months, several. What can you do to keep from being discouraged, to keep me from saying, I love this, but maybe it's not for me because luck isn't panning out?
Well, I think the side hustle thing really helps because at least you're doing something and you feel productive.
I'd like to speak to my experience when I was younger with my parents discouraging me from games in general. Just because you have a moment or a couple months or a year where you're not in the industry that you want to be, that does not mean that the industry will never be there for you. You can definitely keep yourself fresh, even if so I heard something that was like, if you want to become a professional in something, it takes 10 years, right? But if you don't have those consecutive 10 years, that doesn't mean that like you failed or like you can't go back to it, right? So even if you have this time where like things aren't panning out, give yourself some grace, maybe take something else for a while, but you don't have to give up on that.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Like you don't have to give up on it. There's so many opportunities in terms of like, I mean, find a group out there, find the people that bring you joy and spend time with them, work on a project with them. In my experience, almost every position I've had in terms of like my career in tech has been via networking, and it's been because somebody I've talked to at some meetup has said, hey, you know, we have an opening I think you'd be perfect for, or, you know, I saw the work that you did here and I would love for you to come, you know, work on this project with me. Don't be discouraged. Just keep your friends, keep making friends, keep your friends close. And like you said, like if you have to do something else for a little bit, like keep your joy somewhere. Like if that has to be a side hustle of where your joy is, just make sure that you are always, you know, chasing what makes you happy with the people that make you happy, and build that network of, you know, like find your tribe out there.
I have one other thing to say to that I can't believe I haven't brought up yet, but do a game jam. They're really fun and it keeps you like sharp. So if you have nothing else going on and you're like, well, whatever, do a game jam. It's just a weekend, or, you know, depending on where it is. Check out itch.io if you don't know any game jams to look at. They've always got one going on. Itch, like.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you.